So first up, I want to talk about my personal use case for the Pathfinder, specifically the way I interact with my peripherals, which may be a little bit unusual. Personally, I'm very perceptive of the objects that I play with in my hands. Ah, God. I notice all of the nuances of the shape, the way things feel in each area of my hand, and I enjoy exploring this a lot in my peripherals. Experimenting with different mouse shapes is a fun challenge for me, and with the Orbital Pathfinder, I can add a spacer here or change a module there and completely alter the shape of the mouse in a heartbeat. The base kit makes it possible to produce over 3,000 configurations for the Pathfinder, which is a lot. But this has been increased infinitely with the release of the Labs feature. Labs is essentially the Orbital team sharing the 3D files for the 3 different module areas on the Pathfinder. So we've got one on the right hand side, one on the left and one on the hump. This helps the community to make their own modules for the Pathfinder, which means the Pathfinder is now effectively open source with reference to its modules at least. You can print modules from home now or order them directly from the Orbital team, and some members of the community have gone absolutely nuclear with this feature. There's a chap called Bennick123 on Reddit, and they've been scanning their favourite mouse shapes into the Orbital Labs program, and now you can basically print modules based on 3D prints of community favourite mouse shapes. This is really exciting to me personally, and I plan to buy as many modules for the Orbital Pathfinder as I possibly can. Something that I found to be a genuine use case for the spacers on this mouse, which I feel is actually an underrated feature of the Pathfinder, is that you can adjust the mouse width and length to cater for the aim style you want to achieve or accentuate. You'll probably be aware that a narrower and shorter mouse results in more range of motion and manoeuvrability within your grip. And this sort of shape would be useful in a game like the Finals or Apex Legends, where there's a lot of verticality to the gameplay and aiming requirements. Whereas a wider and longer mouse results in less range of motion and increasing its X-axis stability as a result. This sort of config might be useful for tactical FPS games like Counter-Strike or Valorant, where the vertical tracking is less of a requirement and X-axis aiming and crosshair placement becomes more important. I genuinely do mix up the width and length of my configs as much as I do the modules, depending on the game I'm playing, and I love this as a feature of the Pathfinder. Adding a spacer to the back hump will not only increase the length of the mouse, it will also change the position of the side modules in your grip, which in itself is a top tip for Pathfinder owners. Increasing the length of your config could open up some different grip experiences which you may not have tried before. And while I do play around with the spacers quite a lot, my own configurations tend to settle on the small spacer on the left-hand side of the mouse. This is because my hands are quite wide, and it helps to bring my thumb module out slightly without bringing it too far out that it interferes with either my comfort or my aim preferences. When possible, I like to have a straight thumb on the side of my mice, and the sensation of steering the mouse with the full length of my thumb is something I enjoy a lot. I tend to settle on using all of the spaces on the right hand side of the mouse because again I have wide hands with long fingers and I enjoy a relaxed claw grip. This extra width on the side of the mouse means I get a really satisfying open hand aiming experience without any cramping in my hand from having to clamp the mouse too tightly between my fingers and thumb. And I typically use the small spacer on the hump. This is not the perfect length for my long hands, but it does push my preferred hump module far enough back into my hand that it makes contact with the flesh of my thumb pad, and it's a really nice balance between being fully palm fitting and being somewhat still maneuverable. So the point of this explanation is not to try and sell you my configuration, but really just to highlight how personal, flexible and meaningful the small adjustments to shape can be on the Orbital Pathfinder. So let's talk about my standout base kit modules and why I like them. So the latch thumb groove satisfies my Zowie U2 thumb groove itch. It hugs the curve of my thumb in its entirety and feels super comfortable and locked in. This helps me to execute what I describe as aiming with my thumb because my thumb is comfortably tucked into the side of the mouse, acting as a solid anchor point on the left-hand side of the mouse. The right hand hump module feeds into this aiming with my thumb experience by providing my fleshy thumb pad with some contact that I can squeeze and flex into with the pad of my thumb. My ring and pinky finger can comfortably sit on the right hand side of the hump too as needed, but the contact is noticeably more prominent on the thumb side of the hump. And the pinch and claw modules are my favourite on the right hand side of the mouse. The pinch module feels like a traditional symmetrical mouse curve on that side, which is a safer shape option for most people that I enjoy playing around with sometimes, whereas the claw module feels very tapered and helps me to lock my fingers into place. The claw module is my favourite right hand module overall because I can either aggressively claw grip, making the most out of those heavy tapers, or I can relax claw grip too, wrapping my fingers through the shape of the taper, and the very slight flare at the end of the module helps to support my fingertips in that relaxed claw. So I get a lot of stability with this configuration, which when coupled with my spacer preferences, puts my configuration at LCR131. So if you own a Pathfinder, I'd love for you to tell me what your favourite configuration is and why you like it in the comment section down below. I might just give it a try. So overall, I feel the build quality of the Pathfinder is really, really impressive. You know, there's so many moving parts and the mouse still feels really solid in my grip. It is more flexible than some of the other mice you'd buy, which are like whole body mice. But I think that that is a concession that I'm willing to make, given that this is such a flexible product and it doesn't bother me at all in use. It's a wonderful product, really well made to the highest standards. Well done to the Orbital team for that. The button implementation on my Batch 1 unit is great too. The clicks are Omron opticals, which to me feel really great. They're super light and tactile, and the tactility is something I feel is often missing from other optical switch implementations, but they feel great for me on the Orbital Pathfinder. There's very little pre or post travel, and I've enjoyed these a lot in use. The side buttons are a little bit less satisfying to press, being a little less tactile, but they're perfectly serviceable in use, and I haven't been distracted by them in game, which in my mind means that they're good enough. The aluminium scroll wheel is also great. You know, it's not slippery at all on my finger. Its steps are nicely balanced, not too defined, not too smooth, and the click on the scroll wheel also works really nicely. It's not stiff and has a satisfying tactility to it. The second batch of the Pathfinder has just released, and they've made some changes to both the main clicks and the side buttons, which is a surprise to me because I didn't think the main clicks needed changing, but it is great to see the team's commitment to quality, and I'm interested to hear how these things change in the next revision of the Pathfinder. I'll put a link to the store page below in the description of this video if you want to get access to that second batch of the Pathfinder, and you can use code LogPile for a 2% discount, and that will just help to support me as a channel as well if you choose to go ahead with your purchase. In terms of the coating on the mouse, the modules and the clicks have a nice rubbery coating applied to them, and they're grippy enough that I don't need to apply any grip tape, which is great. With reference to other technical specifications, the mouse is capable of 8K polling rate, although I tend to use mine at 1K all the time, and in 1K polling, the battery lasts a really long time, which for me is perfect. That's all the performance that I personally need, and the battery lasts forever, which again, is great. The mouse weighs below 60 grams regardless of the config you use, which is insane too. You know, really sitting in what I would describe as the sweet spot for mouse weight. If you're really sensitive to mouse weight, you can just use less spacers, but really, you know, I think between 54 and 60 grams is a perfect weight for a mouse of this size. The mouse comes with a 2-year warranty. You also have the option to buy a different base shell color if you want to add a level of customization to your unit. Mine has this nice orange base color, which I think sets off the Pathfinder for me visually. You know, it's really striking on the desk and it makes it look like some sort of clone trooper from Star Wars. And like I say, it's super eye-catching and I really, really like this as a feature. And that will set you back a little bit more in terms of it being an additional purchase. In my opinion, I think it's really worth it. So one of the benefits you get from having this transparent shell is that you can actually see the modular system working underneath the mouse as you put the pieces in. This isn't something that you'll show all your friends, but it is super cool and satisfying, and I enjoy this a lot just to play around with occasionally. So the Pathfinder is quite pricey and there's no getting around that, but I genuinely think it is worth the price that you pay for it. I quite often get bored of mouse shapes and will buy new mice just to feel something new in my hands. And the price of treating my peripherals this way very quickly adds up. You can achieve this same new hand feel thousands of times with this one base product, which if you gel with the product well, which I suspect you will, means that you might in the long run end up saving yourself a bit of cash if you interact with your peripherals in a similar way to me. So I'm going to show you very quickly the web driver that the Orbital team have just released for the Orbital Pathfinder, and then we'll roll into the conclusion. All right, here's the web-based driver. So I'm just going to click through these really quickly, but you can remap your keys and your buttons. You can adjust your DPI and your polling rate settings, sort out your macros, adjust the light on the dongle if you feel it's too bright for you. Stick on here the angle at which you hold your mouse if you want to correct it, if you find it causing you issues, your lift-off distance, etc. Overall, you know, a really good web-based driver. I really enjoy this functionality. Thank you, Orbital, for the effort that's gone into this one. To conclude my review, I think I've given you as much of a recommendation as I can already up to this point. You can tell that I am honestly such a big fan of this product. I might do more coverage on it later if my preferences change in terms of configs, but I just want to sing the team's praises a bit here, really. They've done a brilliant job making this product. The engineering that they've employed on this mouse is genuinely insane. It's really clever. The guys have got massive brains. So I want to say well done to the Orbital team. And I honestly, hand on heart, can say this is a mouse that I'll be using for a long time. I really enjoy it. And if you have the money and you can afford it, and what I've described in my use case for it seems like something that would be transferable to your use case, then absolutely go and pick one up. Hopefully you've got all the information you need to inform your purchase. Peace out. Bye-bye, brothers.